Welcome back to another episode of Reason for Truth. I received a comment by a gentleman by the name of Adrian Schmidt, very respectfully commenting on a recent episode he did on America's New Christianity. You want to check that episode out. His comment was that the Middle Eastern Zoroastrians are the origin of the Judeo-Christian Bible. And in this episode, I'm going to take a look at Adrian's comment and respond to his assertions by diving deeper into what exactly Eastern Zoroastrianism is and why perhaps Adrian believes what he believes, and give you an answer. So is that true or not? We're going to answer that question. In the end, you'll be surprised to find out that you, as well, perhaps people you know, really have been touched or maybe even influenced by Zoroastrian beliefs, okay, which are our New Age beliefs. Greetings, everyone. I'm Stephen Garofalo. Welcome back to Reason for Truth, where the truth comes first and the reasons come last, but where we're always and constantly learning, because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. Here we help you cut through really the fog of culture's distorted truth. Why? Because in our relative world, the truth doesn't change. That's truth is God. But the human will to distort it certainly does. We cut through the distortion of current events with the truth of God as an antidote to the false messages of this sinful world. Before we get started, make sure you do a couple things. Make sure you go and smack that subscribe button down there. That's important. Give the old Sicilian left hook to the alert bell right below. Today's truth is that what we're seeing really is a Christianity that's being affected by our Zoroastrian religion here in the 21st century. Today, 2021, which is really a form of the New Age movement. And sadly, because some Christians are becoming New Age Christians as they stray from the scriptures to pursue God in their own image. Dr. Norman Geisler, as you know, my professor and advisor for many years, used to say, God made us in his image and we've been returning the favor ever since. That's what this is about today. All right, gang, let's just jump right in. And I get weekly comments, as I said before, on my page, and received a very respectful and well laid out comment by a gentleman by the name of Adrian Schmidt, who, by the way, responded with, I want to say again, the utmost respect, which Adrian, I appreciate. If you're listening, thank you. Hands out to you, man. Thank you for your comment, for being a thinker. Today, I'd like to as well to respond respectfully, biblically, and really in a well-informed way back, all right, and give an answer. So let me open up by reading what Adrian Schmidt wrote, and then I'm going to respond. Adrian wrote this: the Middle Eastern Zoroastrians, he says, the origins of the Judeo-Christian Bible, spoke in allegory in ancient times, which were then passed on by the Greeks. The Western world follows an old Roman system in which the Romans used the Greek translated Christian Bible and the masses through the Bible to be literal. Jesus, Yeshua, came from the tradition of the Mithra. The Bible in its entirety was a wealth of knowledge in its allegories, which explains astrology. See where I'm going with the New Age, right? Meditation, human bodily functions, but most importantly, the human mind. That's why knowledge is very important to the Gnostics, by the way. I just put that in. And he goes on to say, the kingdom of God is within you. It's interesting. What does that mean? If you would like more information, he says, to expand your knowledge, search Bill Donahue's or Neville Goddard's Who Translates the Allegories of the Bible. I read this comment, by the way, quickly and responded to what I thought he was saying, which was I thought he was talking about Greek mythology in relation to, there's the assertion that Greek myth, and I think this actually does play into that, which is that Greek mythology is where New Testament derived from. But I gave him another comment that was more quick. I was in the middle of working and doing 10 different things and probably should have sat more patiently. Subject of another whole episode. But listen, I read his comment, reread it, and then I want to address it today more deeply and respond to Adrian's comment in a more academic way or a more knowledgeable way. That's what he's asking for. Of his assertion or to his argument that the Middle Eastern Zoroastrians are the origin of the Judeo-Christian Bible. Listen, you want to wait it out to the very end. It gets a little deep at times, but I think you're going to find that you're going to learn a lot about history and theology and philosophy, which really does play into what you're seeing today in 2021. Because this is important to you, and it's important to me to just listen. We're seeing this influence and played out. What Adrian's talking about is playing out very deeply in Western, Eastern, and Middle Eastern, and all cultures around the world. You could see by Adrian Schmidt, right? He's an American. That's at least an American name. So without further ado, let's start by answering Adrian's main point or assertions that he's made in order to do that. Adrian made the assertion that the Middle Eastern Zoroastrians were the origins of the Judeo-Christian Bible, and that it was done so through or in allegory in ancient times, right? Which was passed on by the Greeks. This is what he said. This sounds credible on the surface, but you have to understand arguments, if you don't know the premises, can be valid. In other words, all men are four-legged reptiles. Steve is a man, therefore Steve is a four-legged reptile. Now, it's actually valid, right? It's valid that if all men are four-legged reptiles, and if it's true that Steve is a man, then it follows that the conclusion's true and that Steve is a four-legged reptile. The only problem is it is true that Steve is a man, but it's not true that all men are four-legged reptiles. We know that. Everybody knows that. But you see, if you didn't know that, you would think what was being said is true. And that's what's going on a little bit here, what I see it, and so therefore I'm going to have to sift through this a little more deeply, right? Again, it sounds credible on the surface because it's valid if the premises are true. But it says a lot of things about a lot of things, and we want to address that today. First, Adrian opens up with the assertion that the Middle Eastern Zoroastrians is the origins of, or are the origin, or is the origin of Judeo-Christian Bible, which he asserts was given an allegory in ancient times before being passed on to the Greeks. This leads us to ask what or who the Middle Eastern Zoroastrians are, right? Who are these people? What is this religion? The answer is that Zoroaster, also known as Zerubbabel, was an ancient Iranian Persian prophet after whom a religion called Zoroastrianism was named. Now, that's our start point. Adrian went on to say that Persia is the origins, and that's important to note that Persia, by the way, corresponds to the modern state of Iran. So if you hear the word Persia, that's what you're speaking about here with Zoroastrian, is Persia. Persia is Iran, okay? They're interchangeable there. It's alluding to that at least. Ancient Persia was an empire, meaning a vast collection of states and kingdoms extending from the shores of Asia Minor to the west of the Indus River Valley, the east of the northward to southern Russia, and in the south included Egypt and the regions bordering the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, okay? To give you a bit of history, listen, the Persian Empire defeated the Babylonians in 539 BC, and then what happened? They fell to Alexander the Great in 331 BC. Now, this is important because it gives us a better idea of what Adrian is coming from, his perspective, his worldview, his position, his history. At first, I thought perhaps he's Persian, or maybe he's Muslim, or both. I thought they're two different things, by the way, but they can be the same. I guess if you're a Muslim and went to Persia, I guess you're a Persian Muslim. But judging by his name, I think that he is probably American, and I found that very interesting. So I kept reading on, doing more research, and I believe he's a Zoroastrian Christian, or perhaps a New Age Zoroastrian Christian, or he's just a New Age Zoroastrian. I don't know. I don't know what his worldview is. You say, Steve, you calling him a Christian? No, I'm just saying that he may call himself that, or believe that's what he is. He is, where his beliefs are. And he has a free will to do that. Everyone has the free will to believe as they choose, and I respect that. He was respectful of me. I don't believe it's right. The Bible tells us very different. I know it's not right, okay? But we're here to bring clarity to what was said, and to go ahead and to bring clarity as to the issue. But Adrian, if you're listening, thank you. Please leave a comment. Let us know what your worldview is. How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as a New Age person, or as a Zoroastrian, an ancient, a modern? Be helpful. Perhaps we could do a follow-up. Let me know. You student in the comments. Now, back to Adrian's comment, it's important to look more closely at what Zoroastrianism really is, because if we get it wrong there, we get it wrong there forward. Zoroastrianism is a religious concept taught by the Iranian sage Zarathustra, and more properly known as Mazdaism. And it appears that the early history of the movement is very obscure, by the way. It's not real firm historical chronological information out there. It's just there's a lot of disjointed information. Some might disagree, but there's not a lot of cohesive evidence, historical evidence, meaning that there's no real credible written historical record for Zoroastrianism. It has a lot to do with just myth and tradition. Listen, the Bible's quite the opposite, and that we have thousands and thousands and thousands of confirmed ancient manuscripts, and we have extra biblical evidence as well. It is likely that Zarathustra, the Iranian sage who taught this belief, actually lived in the 6th century BC and may have been born and raised in northwest Iran, migrating to the really more to the southerly center of the country about 300 years before the Alexandrian invasion. That's what we think. And he preached the worship of the high god Ahura Mazda as a supreme, true, and unique deity or supreme god in ancient Iranian religion, especially in Zoroastrianism. In the 6th century, Zarathustra taught his followers to seek goodness through ethical actions and good works, which is not a bad thing, by the way, in and of itself. But if you look at it, that came after the Judeo-Christian ethic, and really the establishment of Judaism and Christianity. Not as Adrian stated, which is that Judeo-Christian ethic came from Zoroastrianism. I think it's quite the opposite. But it's important to understand that the concept of Zarathustra never really totally escaped the older ideas which came prior to Zoroastrianism, but was much more mystical and theoretical. Most of what is known of his teaching actually came from much later sources and traditions, which is why it's connected to the New Age movement here in America as well. The New Age movement, the New Christianity, America's New Christianity, which we just did an episode on. Want to definitely check that out. And I'm going to talk about that shortly. In the end, the vast hierarchy of spirits and gods were proposed by Zoroastrian and philosophers that came later in time and who sought to unite the conceptions of Zarathustra with the ancient Persian religion's beliefs. The driving idea resulting in an effort to cement these beliefs, which in turn became myth. And in the end, this is what we've come to know as the Zoroastrian religion. That's first. Second, it's important to note that, like Adrian, that this is still practiced in its per se form in India and includes all the ancient customs, the sacred and unquenchable fire, the elaborate mystical rituals, and the exposure of dead bodies in the Dakma, the towers of the silence, and literal meanings of Zoroastrianism is extensive. It includes primarily the Avesta and many subtexts in the Pahlavi derived from Muhammad Reza Pahlavi. Now, this is important, also known as Muhammad Reza Shah. You've heard of the Shah of Iran, right? Now, the Shah of Iran was the very last of the Shahs in this imperial state of Iran, who started September 16, 1941, until his overthrow in the Iranian Revolution in February 11th, 1979. We just talked about that in the last episode. It's called Inside the Iranian Embassy, which outlines my experience in the 1980s, whereby I accidentally found myself inside the Iranian Embassy in the early 1980s. Not too long after the Iranian hostage crisis, or the hostages were freed. You don't want to miss that, so go put a link below for you. Check that out. Most of the thrust of Zoroastrianism was passed on to Gnosticism. Different word. All right? When I came to Charlotte, one of the first men I met at the gym, he said, "Steve, you know what a Gnostic is?" But anyways, this is what we're talking about. Gnosticism is mentioned in the Bible, right? So Zoroastrianism was passed on to Gnosticism. Mithricism, exactly. Remember Mithricism, Mithri, which is what the comment addressed, and Persia Islam. This is important because this is going to open your eyes to what you see going on right today, right? This is what you see today is rooted in thousands of years of history, a lot of the issues, the conflicts. Thirdly, this leads us to full circle back to Adrian's comment regarding Zoroastrianism as the core substance behind the Holy Bible, the New Testament in particular. When we break it all down, we find Gnosticism is addressed in the Bible and not vice versa. In other words, the Bible talks about Gnosticism. Gnosticism, before Gnosticism really was a big thing, but it was a big thing in the New Testament. We're going to talk about that. Gnosticism in the Bible was something that, in the New Testament writers, they address as something that Christ followers were constantly battling against in terms of its attempt to infiltrate and to distort the true gospel of Jesus Christ and what it means to be a Christian. Same thing. Same stuff, different day. The things that we experience here in 2021, don't think they're new. The only thing new is the latest computer chip. And even then, God knew from eternity what that chip would exist and what it would do and when it would come out. Nothing new today. Same stuff. Solomon said it. Nothing new under the sun. It's a cycle. And we're just experiencing the same stuff in a different format. That's all. So again, when you're looking at this Zoroastrianism or Gnosticism, this attempt to infiltrate the Bible and the beliefs of Jesus Christ and Christianity, and really, which is on contrary, is very well documented. That's the Bible and Christianity through the Old Testament and the New Testament, and by way of extra biblical sources and historians. The Bible has all that going forward. It's the most validated ancient manuscript in the world, right? There are thousands, by the way, of ancient manuscripts for Christianity, New Testament and Old Testament, validating the Bible both in its Old New Testament form, and it's the most validated ancient manuscript that exists as compared to any other ancient manuscript, both religious and non. This takes us closer to modern times, by the way, whereby we find knowledge to be worshipped more than God himself, who is the source of all knowledge. And this takes us to our fourth point, right? Fourthly, Gnostics followed a variety of religious movements that had stressed gnosis, or knowledge, or gnosis, or knowledge, especially in one's origins, right? Knowledge of one's origins. And this is why Adrian in his comments stressed to me that I want more knowledge. I thought that was a great answer. To seek a number of sources to bring clarity to his positions. Now, wanting more knowledge is the centerpiece of Gnosticism and Zoroastrianism. No one is certain as to the origins of Gnosticism. Okay, some believe that Gnosticism was rooted in heretical group within Judaism, as Adrian alluded to. That kind of fits in what he's saying. Just this one's going to say which one copied who. Supporters of this theory cite the Apocalypse of Adam, which was a work discovered at Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt, by the way, an archaeologist in 1945. It's considered a Sethian work of apocalyptic literature dating to the 1st to 2nd centuries AD, but before both the Old and New Testament. It appears that the early Gnostic documents reveal Jewish origins, by the way, not Zoroastrian ones, while others give it a Christian context. Now, an initial form of this may have been infiltrated. You can see this in the Church of Colossae, to give credit to Adrian's assertion, but this is what the New Testament writers wrote about in fighting Gnostic beliefs as false. This takes us to our fifth point, which is that the church fathers, what did they say? During the 2nd through the 4th centuries, Gnosticism was addressed as a major threat by the church fathers. Fathers such as Augustine, Justin Martyr, Irenaeus Clement, Alexandria, Tertullian, and Origen, okay? Early fathers of the church held that Gnosticism had 1st century roots, and that Simon the sorcerer of Samaria, as found in Acts 8, was the first Gnostic according to the church fathers. Simon practiced magic, claimed to be divine, and taught that his companion, a former prostitute, which is reincarnated as Helen of Troy, this is attributed to the Apotheosis Megdale of Simon. Now remember, in Acts 8, Philip traveled to the city of Samaria to preach and perform miracles. This is where Simon the magician lived. And Simon's disciple, he was a former Samaritan named Menander, who taught in Syria in Antioch near the end of the 1st century, taught that those who believed in him would not die, and that claim was nullified when what happened? He himself died. There you go. There's much more that can be said of this, but in conclusion, Gnosticism is an organized movement. We have to understand that the sources that they have, the original sources, they don't exist. The sole surviving remnant is in southwestern Iran, where we find none other than Adrian's religion called Zoroastrian. Adrian as I believe, is an American, which leads me to believe that perhaps Adrian is a New Ager. Now, many Gnostic teachers live on and among New Agers, existentialists and Bible critics, and you see a revival of these interests of Zoroastrianism and Gnosticism. You see that in the Gospel of Thomas. You might have heard of that, or the Jesus Seminar, which is really just case in point. The Jesus Seminar is a good example of just people who claim to be Christians that claim actually then to show that to try to make assertions that the Bible's not true and there's no evidence behind it. This is where this is all going. See, now you're saying, hey, this is what's been going on. And that Jesus Seminar has been out for a long time, many decades. There's also a tendency, even among some evangelical scholars, to deny the physical nature of the resurrection, which is supported by Gnosticism. In the end, Zoroastrianism lives in through Gnosticism, through the New Age movement, which is where a lot of people have ended up today. And as an end result, as you see today, America's new Christianity is a result, amongst other movements around the world. I addressed that. You can check out that episode, as I alluded to before, and that's called America's New Christianity. Adrian, I want to say thank you for your well laid out comment, your respectful manner. I respect you as a thinker, And I hope that, listen, in the seeker of God, I respect you as being a seeker of knowledge and a seeker of the true God of the universe, I hope. I look forward to hearing more from you or back from you. In closing, please leave your comments below. I promise to respond with a reasonable amount of time. And for additional resources, you can go to reasonfortruth.bible, reasonfortruth.org. And again, make sure you check those links down below. If you're listening on podcasts or by way of video, you know what I always say, man. You smash that subscribe button. Then what do you do next? Give the Gonzalo City's throw, man, the left Sicilian hook. Joey come out and say, man, what are you doing over here? Steve's told me to do that over at Reason for Truth. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Take it out. Give a piece of Italian bread, you go on your way. And make sure you go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And then what? Senseo Sinistro. Go ahead and left hook on that alert bell. The little alert bell will tell you when subscription pops up. That's the bottom line. All right. Appreciate that. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, I'll see you for the next episode of Reason for Truth. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.